Hey there friends and enemies, JoPa here again, and today I want to break down the recent Helldivers 2 controversy with them requiring PC players to sign into PlayStation Network in order to continue playing the game starting in June. I do think some of the reaction is overblown and a bit of rage bait. However, I also understand a bit of the frustration from not only players but also the developers over at Arrowhead Studios as well, because this could have been handled so much better, and there are so many ways that this could have been implemented and not make it feel like it's a problem. So let's jump into what we know first and then go into some of the thoughts that I have after that. Starting from the beginning, Helldivers 2 has always had the requirement, always had a notification that you need to sign into PlayStation Network in order to access Helldivers 2 online functionality. There's a linking option that you need to do, but it wasn't enforced, so there was also a skip button. And that's where I think a bit of the confusion comes into place. It did feel like, even though some of the things say that the linking was mandatory, it did feel optional when you could just skip it right from the very beginning. And so I understand people feeling misled because it simply wasn't enforced at launch. The CEO of Arrowhead has come out and said that the reason for that is because the game was so much more wildly successful than they had anticipated. That feature was not working properly and was having a lot of issues. So in order to alleviate that, they weren't enforcing the fact that you needed a PSN account, despite the fact that Sony has come out and said that all online games will require PSN sign-in in order to play them on PC going forward. This is not something that's new either. We've seen it from Microsoft with games like Halo and Gears of War. We've seen it from Ubisoft games and others that have their own sign-in that require you, in order to play online, to sign into their own network. And so the recent controversy with it just being on PSN is a little strange to me, considering it is something that is commonplace, but there are some obvious differences. One, this was not enforced at launch, so a lot of people felt like it would not be mandatory, which is understandable. I don't think it's enough to ask for a refund if you can still play the game going forward. You just have to take a minute to sign into PSN when you're signed into so many other types of accounts anyway. And even as a primarily PlayStation player, I had to sign into my Microsoft account in order to play Sea of Thieves on PSN. So this is not something that's new. The other problem, though, is that certain areas, certain countries are locked out of having a PSN account. So if you bought the game and now will be unable to play it because you don't have access to a PSN account, or you'll risk getting a PSN ban because you make an account from another country, even though they don't really enforce that. Just like with this situation, Arrowhead didn't enforce this rule, and now they are. So PlayStation could retroactively start enforcing that as well. So you don't want to create an account that's going to ultimately get banned and take away everything that you earn. That would be very, very frustrating. However, those players are definitely in the minority. If you are unable to play the game, you should absolutely be getting a refund. And again, Arrowhead has come out and said that they are trying to work it out so that way those players will still be able to play the game whether they get a refund or not. Like, if you get a refund, you're returning the game, so you won't have access to it anymore. But you either get a refund, or even in those places where you don't have access to PSN, you'll still be able to play Helldivers 2 going forward. And those are the players that, honestly, those are the only players I really feel bad for, just because they have very limited actual options, and so that can be very, very frustrating. However, the rest of the players, I think, have gotten a little carried away. Obviously, the game has gotten over 100,000 negative reviews in just the space of a couple days, so a lot of people are upset. But I think it's jumping a bit on the bandwagon to be that frustrated when a simple sign-in will fix the issue and the game is still playable. It's still as fun as it ever was. We're getting consistent updates, and I worry this will hurt future content for Helldivers 2, and that's a bit of a personal frustration for me, because I think the game is still a lot of fun. I still want to play it. I still want to jump in every so often and play with friends. It's got a lot of features that it does very, very well. However, all of this could have been avoided had Sony handled it differently? Had Arrowhead and Sony been able to come up with a better solution? For example, they could have made it so that you could get a skin or a pack or some super credits, something like that, by linking your PSN to your Steam account to Helldivers 2. And so what that would have done, it would have encouraged a massive amount of players in order to do that. And I think a lot of people would have just done it without thinking because they value rewards. Same thing you see when games have Twitch campaigns. A lot of people who don't even watch Twitch will go on there, sign up, watch the site in order to just get the rewards. So I think that alone would have fixed a lot of these issues. The other thing is having this rollout be so long after 3 months after launch, I think is a bit of an issue as well, because the way they came out with this announcement just feels like it was like, hey, here's what we were doing. This is a massive change. There was no warming up period. There's no way to like ease people in this. There was no offering of, hey, we don't want to do this, but here's what's going to eventually happen. So over the next 6 months, we're going to be rolling this out, and here's what we're going to give you as a softener, something to allow people to understand that this is a required feature. It's not that big of a deal, but the way they announced it was incredibly harsh, and it led to a lot of bad feelings. And it does seem like Sony is only doing this for online games, so we might not see this type of thing with Ghost of Tsushima unless you play the online mode. We might not see it with other games like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Final Fantasy 16 when those eventually come to PC. Who knows? That remains to be seen, but it is a interesting concept that, again, I don't think is a big deal in the grand scheme of it, just having that linked functionality. However, again, for those players who cannot have PSN, it can be very frustrating, and I understand why this feels a bit like a bait and switch, even if it's, again, probably not that big of a deal at the end of the day. I have found a lot of people to be capitalizing on this situation by making outrageous statements and saying Sony is the devil and all this kind of stuff just because of them requiring the sign-in, when again, there's a lot of situations where I haven't seen that same level of outrage for a bunch of other companies that require the same exact thing. So, and you could talk about security and PSN getting hacked, but those other companies have had those same issues over the course of time as well. So that is not a brand new thing. Anyway, I'd love to hear from you guys. Do you think this is an overreaction from people? Do you think it's a fair reaction? I think 100,000 negative reviews and meanwhile, the developers over at Arrowhead are encouraging people to leave this feedback so they have ammunition to go back to Sony and essentially tell them, hey, our player base is unhappy. We need to fix this. Here is the proof. So I think that makes a lot of sense. I do think, though, that ultimately refunding the game when you can still play it and it's still fun is weird energy to me, just for having to sign into PlayStation Network. But again, for those who can't do it, it's obviously a very frustrating thing. Hopefully they get this situation handled. They come with some kind of appeasement for the player base. Maybe they say, hey, sorry we messed up. Here's what we're going to give you. Here's what we're going to change. Here is the way we're going to fix this going forward. I would love to see that personally, but we'll have to wait and see. I'll keep you updated if we hear anything else. My name is Jopa. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Helps me out tremendously. Shows you want to see more Helldivers 2 content. I know some people are going to say dead game. I already got comments on other Helldivers 2 videos of people being kind of gnarly about it, and it's fair. I understand, but I still think it's overblown. Anyway, my name is Jopa. Have a good one. I'll catch you all later.